Y todo esto en un momento en el que vemos como los futuros de Wall Street anticipan hasta ahora movimientos de subidas, tanto en los futuros del S&P como en los futuros del Nasdaq, y por supuesto viendo cómo ese mercado de divisas, ese euro dólar, está retrocediendo a esta hora. Tenemos a la divisa comunitaria a punto de perder el 1,05, ahí lo tienen, 1,0499. Y hasta ahora, por supuesto, la máxima atención informativa llega con ese encuentro del presidente ruso Vladimir Putin. Se reúne con el ministro de Defensa para hablar el resumen de desempeño de Fuerzas Armadas y establecer objetivos para el año próximo. Vamos con Putin.
And continuing to provide the illegitimate regime in Kiev with weapons and money, sending their mercenaries and military advisors, thus promoting a continued conflict. At the same time, they try to keep their population in fear of a Russian attack. Their tactics are very simple. They push us to the red line. They push us to the boundary, forcing us to respond, and then they start presenting us as a threat, just as they did during the Soviet times. NATO countries are racking up their military expenses. They're deploying their strike groups near our borders. Now there are over 100,000 US troops in Europe, and this is far more than the warranted amount. They're also growing their presence in the Asia-Pacific. The United States is creating new military and political alliances that undermine the established security architecture that have been created over decades. They are also working to deploy long-range systems which have a range of 5,500 kilometers. They are working on the deployment and redeployment of missile systems in Europe and the Asia-Pacific. And we used to have a treaty which regulated these activities, but it has now no longer in force due to the actions of the United States. We have underscored many times that we will not deploy intermediate range missiles until the United States deploy similar weapons in a region of the world. That was essentially a unilateral obligation undertaken by Russia. But if the United States start deploying such weapons, then any and all such voluntary restrictions will be lifted. And considering the situation, we have to take additional measures to ensure our safety and the safety of our allies. And we are doing this in a careful and weighted manner, taking care of the socioeconomic development of our country. We are modernizing our armed forces and increasing their capabilities. And for this purpose, we have created the Leningradsky and Moskovsky military districts, and we've increased a number of our armed forces personnel to 1.5 million. The share of state-of-the-art military equipment in nuclear forces is now 95%, and the basic principles governing the use of such weapons have been updated, as outlined in the updated state nuclear deterrence policy. And once again, so that no one accuses us of nuclear saber rattling, it is a deterrence policy. Along with the nuclear triad, conventional arms are being developed rapidly. Advanced robotic complexes are supplied to our troops, including those using AI technologies. Those include intelligence and strike drones, naval drones, and various multi-purpose vehicles. We need to ensure continued progressive development of our army and navy, and to achieve our goals in the special military operation effectively and efficiently, rising to the challenges that our country is currently facing. And our priorities include maintaining the stability, strategic security, protecting territorial integrity and sovereignty of our country through the development of our strategic nuclear forces. And we will continue this work, creating new systems. At the same time, we must ensure the high combat readiness of non-strategic forces and to carry out regular exercises. We have already mentioned the risks posed by the deployment of missiles by the United States in Europe and Asia Pacific. We will provide a comprehensive response to these threats. And we must focus especially on the detection of possible launches. And we also must ensure the mass production of similar weapons domestically, including hypersonic systems. The Oreshnik intermediate range strike complex has been a well-noted innovation. We have used it as a response to the Western long-range weapons being deployed in Ukraine. It was used in a non-nuclear form, and we must ensure mass production of these complexes to protect ourselves and our allies. Next, we must integrate the experience gained during the special military operation into training programs and curricula, both in military training centers and at universities. At the same time, we must update and clarify our regulations and governing documents. And one of the things I want to emphasize is that members of the personnel, soldiers and officers and sergeants and everyone who has shown themselves to be highly performant must have the opportunities to build a successful military career. And the experience that we've got must be considered in determining the course of industrial developments as well. The precision systems that are currently used utilize new methods of targeting at the final stage of the trajectory, and this has increased its effectiveness. The protection of onboard equipment of missiles has been improved, and the computing capabilities allowing advanced targeting have also been expanded. And taking this further is an important task for the defense industry complex. Another important thing is establishing communication between active military units and defense industrial enterprises. We have achieved a very short times required to fix shortcomings that are identified in combat conditions, but we must improve this further. And of course, we must continue to do everything we can to accelerate the introduction of new technologies and innovations in the military sphere. Next, in order to reduce decision-making times, we have introduced a system for communication between the various branches of the military based on mobile devices, and it has allowed to reduce decision-making times by a factor of 1.2 to 2. And we need to make sure that there is a unified information system used by intelligence and strike units at both the operative and tactical levels.
We need to enhance the production and manufacturing of robotic complexes of various types and classes. In the early period of the special operation, we faced certain difficulties in this regard because the machines that we had were difficult to operate and they were expensive. And now thousands of unmanned vehicles are being sent to the units. We need to enhance their characteristics further, and we need to train operators of such systems. We need to use programs developed based on the experience of the real hostilities. 7. We need to continue to expand military and military technical cooperation with the allied countries and partners, with those who are willing to work with us. And I'm speaking about the majority of the countries in the world now. Comrades, I have already mentioned the great support for the army and the fleet on behalf of the Russian society. People know what we are fighting for, what we are defending. They help the frontline soldiers and they join them themselves. It is of utmost importance that reflects the state of our society. I will cite a number. Daily, on average, more than 1,000 people every day sign contracts to join the army. People voluntarily go to the front lines, and the social benefits for the soldiers, for their families, must be expanded and developed. It is an essential systemic task of the state. Yes, over the last years, a lot has been done in this regard. More than 55,000 soldiers received housing, and in the next 3 years, we plan to allocate 113 billion rubles to help with the housing acquisition. And we need to update the mortgage system. More than 202,000 of the Russian army soldiers received subsidized mortgages, and we need to continue to build military towns to improve the health care for the armed forces. It should be the priority for all the bodies in the government to help to support the participants of the special military operation. We should care of the families of those who have fallen or were severely wounded during the hostilities. They should be our focus. We need to look into the problems that our comrade in arms or their family have, and we need to help them to resolve their issues. This is a task for the Defense Ministry, for the government of the Russian Federation, for all the leaders, for all the authorities at every level. In conclusion, I would like to thank all the participants of the special military operation for their bravery, and I would like to wish all the personnel of the armed forces, the leadership of the Defense Ministry, every success in their difficult job aimed at protecting sovereignty and national interests of Russia, security of our people. And I'm confident that you will continue to resolve all the tasks you're faced with. Thank you for your attention.
Bueno, pues este es el discurso que acaba de poner sobre la mesa Vladimir Putin, el presidente ruso, en esa reunión con el ministro de Defensa, analizando la situación actual del campo de la geopolítica y los retos. Por supuesto, llamamiento, denuncia y crítica a lo que está siendo el despliegue militar y de misiles de Estados Unidos, denunciando además su posición en Europa y en el Indo-Pacífico y señalando precisamente que va a responder a ese despliegue y la necesaria desarrollo tecnológico y militar. Vamos a escuchar al ministro de Defensa ruso.
And increase under these conditions, the Defense Ministry activities are based on the following key factors. First, active combat operations within the special military operation area and individual tasks, and ensuring our military presence in the Central Asian countries, African countries, in Caucasus, and in the Transnistria region, ensuring the full readiness for any developments in the midterm and in the short term, including possible military conflict with NATO and Europe in the coming decades. It is dictated by the decisions made during NATO summit that took place in July this year, and it is also reflected in the doctrines adopted by the United States and other NATO countries. The third factor is the development of the end-to-end technologies such as big data processing or artificial intelligence, robotics, the protected data transfer, the Internet of Things, quantum calculations and communications. So these technologies drastically change the character of the military conflicts at all levels, tactical, operational, or strategical. In accordance with our documents, armed forces must become more flexible and must adapt to innovations, including the innovations in the civilian sector. Factor number 4, capabilities of the Russian economy. First of all, we're speaking about the budget. It must be taken into consideration when we speak about the development of the armed forces. The expenses for the national security has reached the level of 6.3% of GDP, and it sets rigid rules for the efficiency of our efforts, and the president paid special attention to this. And these 4 factors, they define the priorities of the Defense Ministry for the next year, and in the midterm, 10 main directions. And already next year, we will have to accomplish significant results in these directions. Direction number 1, ensuring victory in the special military operation, attaining goals set by the Supreme Commander-in-Chief in his address to the people of Russia before the special military operation, and in his address to the Foreign Ministry. This year, the Russian armed forces liberated almost 4,500 square kilometers of the territory occupied by the adversaries. Neo-Nazis control less than 1% of the Lugansk People's Republic and 25 to 30% of the Donetsk People's Republic, Zaporozhye and Kherson regions. But the combat potential of the enemy is undermined. Their losses exceeded 560,000 soldiers killed and wounded, and total losses are almost 1 million people across the entire period of the special military operation. In the Kursk operation, the Kiev regime lost more than 40,000 soldiers. This year, in the area of the special military operation, we destroyed more than 58,000 vehicles of the enemy, including 18,000 of the vehicles manufactured abroad. Russian high-precision weapons do huge damage to the industrial and defense complex of Ukraine. The enemy has largely lost its capability to manufacture necessary weapons, vehicles, and ammunition. This is why the Kiev regime is making such active efforts to literally drag the Western manufacturers to the territory of Ukraine, but without a lot of success so far. The armed forces of the Russian Federation have seized strategic initiative along the entire line of contact. Currently, the annual advancement has expedited largely and is some 30 square kilometers per day, and the enemy has to stand in defense and to use all the reserves they have. Their units are staffed only by 45-50% at the front lines, and these successes are largely owed to the soldiers and officers and generals of the united grouping of the forces, and personally of their commanders and of their headquarters and of the general staff. And I would like to especially mention the great results by a number of the units: the 1st Tank, 2nd, 5th, 8th, 29th, and 51st Armies, 76th Paratrooper Unit, 98 and 106 Airborne Division, and of course 155 and 810 Marine brigades. And the Defense Ministry is now faced with a number of important tasks. One, first of all, to introduce all the innovations in tactics of military actions that were proven efficient during the military operation, to ensure the use of the storm assault groups covered by the electronic warfare systems and the use of high-precision weapons to automate the managing of the hostilities, and to inform, to train common commanders in this regard. And we need to ensure the integrated information environment of the tactical level. And we already have elements in many units of such a system, but we need to make it a systemic effort. So I'd like to instruct the commanders of the land-based forces and to introduce it already next year. The main breakthrough in the tactics was the use of unmanned aerial vehicles of various designations. They can be used against the enemy for reconnaissance or for electronic warfare. Currently, our forces employ more than 3,500 drones every day, and this number continues to grow to train UAV troops and to develop the ways of using the UAVs and to introduce new types of weapons. We have established the center of the promising unmanned technologies called Rubicon, and we need to focus our efforts on improving the tactics and characteristics of the unmanned aerial vehicles and increasing their range and make them more self-sufficient and protected from the electronic warfare. We introduce a lot of innovative techniques and means that prove great. Just recently, I visited the grouping East, and there was an exhibition of these types of vehicles, and they only have it in dozens, and they paid for these types of machines in blood, but it must be scaled up to the other units. I'm speaking not only about the Armed Grouping East, I'm speaking about Armed Grouping North and other armed forces groupings. For example, during the combat, the land-based robotic complexes have proven efficient. They can mine the land, they can bring ammo, they can evacuate the wounded, and the inventors from the armed forces continue to improve the characteristics of these platforms and of the United Unmanned Aerial Vehicles, and we need to look into this kind of research, and they must be tested systemically, and we must organize production en masse of the best platforms like this. So I'd like to instruct Mr. Krivoruchko to take care of this effort, to be in charge of this effort. We need to ensure that the armed forces have everything they need to accomplish their tasks. For these goals, we continue to work systemically with the regions to provide the armed forces with everything necessary. This year, we have already hired 427,000 soldiers by contract. More than 1,200 people signed contracts every day, so we need to keep up the pace, and an inherent part of staffing the armed forces is the combat training for the new soldiers, and we need to introduce new ways that have proven efficient during the special military operation, and we must synchronize training of the personnel, and we must train them to use the state-of-the-art types of the weapons, and we need to pay special attention to staffing the reserve regiments, and we need to train them to use the state-of-the-art types of weapons and ammo.
And it is also important to make sure that we supply the necessary amount of equipment. This year, we've increased the deliveries of tanks and UAVs by a factor of multiple times, and we must make sure that supplies of equipment and ammunition continue at an increased rate. Out of the 6 main categories, only 2 have seen delays, and the sustainability and stability of supply must be bolstered additionally. During this month, we must see contracts signed to provide all kinds of weapons, and that have a production cycle of 12 to 16 months, and the others must have contracts signed until the second quarter of next year. And transparent price formulas are necessary. And long-term contracts must be signed on fixed prices. In accordance with the presidential decree, we must introduce a new flexible mechanism to procure individual types of military equipment and to reduce delivery times to a week or two compared to several months. The implementation of the presidential instructions have been protracted, and we must address that as well. And we must optimize our practice based on the experience that we have gained during the operation. Multiple launch rocket systems must be placed prudently to avoid enemy strikes, and various other logistics arrangements must be taken care of. We must review our approaches to organize storage and logistics facilities and their placement. We must have a distributed and a tiered system of storage and logistics facilities. And as to the repairs of equipment, additional repairs facilities have been deployed near the frontline areas. And in total, there are over 300 mobile repairs teams from industrial enterprises. And this has allowed us to increase the level of availability of military equipment. But we still need to make additional efforts and to maintain 98% of levels, and we must make sure that this is achieved, because as far as I know, it is assessed to be a realistic figure. Since the start of the operation, we have increased the quality of food rations, and even though some issues have been addressed, we must continue working on this. And deliveries of field kits and clothing sets have been increased, and tactical gear has been provided at an increased rate. In some cases, we've increased them by a factor of 2, and we must make sure that those kits that have been tested and which have proven themselves to be compatible and reliable be supplied further. And we must make sure that deliveries on an updated schedule start in the beginning of next year. The selection of vendors is necessary to ensure high-quality supplies. Jointly with the Federal Security Service, we've established a commission that will monitor the observance of all the requirements. Next, missile defense is being developed to protect key areas and localities. On the whole, 86 Storm Shadow and Scout missiles, as well as ATACMS missiles, HIMARS, and thousands of UAVs have been taken down this year. And there has been a positive experience in creating a missile defense system around Moscow, and we must scale this up in other regions. At the same time, there are many issues to be addressed that we will certainly discuss during the closed part of the meeting. The medium-term initiatives to modernize the armed forces are continuing. As we know, the United States have declared our country to be a source of a permanent and direct threat. And by 2030, we're seeing a modernization of the nuclear forces, and The United States are also updating their missile defense system. This year, a United States missile base was created 160 kilometers from our border in Poland. NATO countries are now adopting a new combat readiness system, which includes the deployment of 100,000 people in 10 days and 800,000 troops in several months. And American missiles, intermediate range missiles, are now confirmed to be planned to be placed in Europe with flight times to Moscow about 8 minutes. In order to repel and counter these threats, we need to address several items. First, we need to introduce a new approach to the development of our armaments, considering the nature of future threats. As President Putin noted in his speech, this includes the improvement of all three components of the nuclear deterrent system. Next year, we will continue introducing the YAS complex for 160M being introduced, and as well as the Knyaz Pozharsky ballistic nuclear submarine. Means and methods are also being developed for non-contact fighting. Various systems utilizing AI technologies and machine-to-machine interaction. We need to create a unified information environment, and this requires developing secure communications, including satellite communications. Automated control systems will also be part of this system. In the coming 5 years, we must introduce new systems that will be superb in their precision and range. The Oreshnik intermediate range missile complex will be progressively improved, and other systems will also be developed. Until the end of this month, we plan to lay out a program to develop the system of armaments for the country, and a report will be presented to the Supreme Commander-in-Chief. A system for the advanced development and introduction of state-of-the-art equipment requires us to have a plan for research and development on each category of weapons. Next year, a network of military experimental centers will be established. Those centers will accumulate information acquired in the field, and this will also be fed into the system for training specialists to take part in this effort. A close cooperation with industrial laboratories is needed, and so the military technological initiative is being launched to ensure that this is happening. The creation of the Moscow and Leningradsky military districts is being finalized, and the number of personnel needs to be clarified. The command and control structures and the organization of these military entities is being developed. A new branch of the military, namely the unmanned vehicle forces, is being created. And considering the increased role of space technology, a new center must be created to develop the relevant technology and to counter threats in this field. The military training and education system is also being developed. There are currently 39 education institutions under the Ministry of Defense, including the Saratov Higher Artillery Academy. We need to make sure that our training and education system provides the number of personnel that will be adequate considering the potential threats in the coming years. And so we must update the list of professions and specialties for the education programs and curricula, as the armed forces require new kinds of expertise, and we must preempt and anticipate the kinds of expertise that is needed and include that in the training process. The military universities need to have all the relevant equipment and resources to ensure proper training. They must have the various training apparatus that are needed, and we must involve the people who have experience from their time in the special military operation. Scientific and industrial enterprises will help us in this effort. We must ensure a continuous system of education and training for servicemen, so that every officer can assess their level of competence and improve their skills, and so that the relevant educational instruments are available, including through mass online courses and programs. Another item is that we need to improve the prestige of the armed forces. The military profession must be one of the most prestigious in society, and so we must increase the status and profile of the officers. Officers and meetings and organizations, and the image of the officer must be improved. Another important aspect is health support for those serving in the army and their families. Medicine is playing a crucial role. About 96% of those who are discharged from hospitals can go back to fighting. And we also have one of the smallest mortality indicators in the world. Medical evacuation, military and military sanitary trains, various other means of transport, as well as rehabilitation facilities, also need to be prioritized. And I'm very grateful to the doctors and all the personnel who are helping our personnel rehabilitate and go back to normal life. And certainly we must provide all the support necessary to this branch. And a lot has been done, but we still must continue working. Speaking of tactical medicine and tactical and medical evacuation, we must provide additional effort to improve the parameters here.
For this, the specialists of the Tactical Medicine Center with the Defense Ministry have trained more than 7,000 instructors. We need to complete adopting the state-of-the-art means of providing first medical aid. We're speaking about the kits of number 8 type. We need to equip the medical units with the modern types of protection to reach the level of evacuation of 100%. Now it's at the level is 40%. Since I start every morning with familiarizing myself with what kind of equipment, what kind of vehicles, what kind of ammunition is provided to the troops. Currently, this level is 44%. It's a very small indicator, and it varies a lot from one grouping to another. There are some units that have 70%, other troops have 30%. And neo-Nazis, they are truly neo-Nazis. They hit our ambulance vans and they stop us from evacuating the wounded ones. So it's a very important field where we need to resolve all the issues promptly. We need to expand the experience of using the small-sized vehicles, including the robotic complexes, to evacuate the wounded. We need to equip the medical units with various types of personnel to staff it from the level of 95% to the level of no less than 98%. We need to provide additional benefits for the medical professionals in this kind of units. We need to ensure modernization of the leading medical organizations and to enhance the volumes of the advanced type of support. We need to complete the construction of 19 new hospitals equipped with the state-of-the-art equipment, and we need to finish the renovation in 10 medical military organizations with the capacity of more than 3,000 beds. 4, we need to ensure all the conditions for the rehabilitation of the troops, in every kind of support for missing limbs and so on. So we need to build 7 new rehab centers, including using the means from out of the budget to ensure the medical rehabilitation for more than 11,000 troops. And starting next year, we are going to change the system of providing medical support for the special military operation soldiers where they ended up losing their limbs. We are going to switch to the new modern standards that will allow to provide the entire cycle of all services for artificial limbs and rehabilitation, and they will receive these services next to the places where they live. And the term of provision of such support should be 3 months. And we need to help rehabilitate such soldiers after severe wounds. We need to use their vast experience in the military commissariats or the military educational institutions. 5, we need to improve the activities of the medical commissions, of the medical expertise. This year, we have already created 5 new regional offices in various regions of the country. We need to enhance the control over how these commissions work to ensure that all the terms are followed, are adhered to, especially when we speak about commissions on the types of wounds the troops receive. The next important priority is the support for the troops and their families. We're speaking about various benefits, about housing help and assistance, and a number of important steps have been made. We digitalized the system, which made it much easier to receive a certificate of participation in the special military operation. So now it takes only 5 days instead of 2 months. One can use the Gosuslugi portal to receive such a certificate, and some 350,000 people applied for such a certificate, and more than 210,000 confirmation papers were issued to everyone who applied. And we would like the tax ministry for helping to implement this innovation. But we need to do more. We need to prompt up the application for the subsidies and for benefits by using digital platforms. We need to ensure fast payments of the remuneration for being actively involved in the hostilities starting this September. These payments were enlarged by 1.5 times, but there are a lot of reproaches about the conditions and the terms of these payments, and we need to remove all these difficulties, all these restrictions. And we need to improve the system of looking for those who were missed in actions and supporting their families. The efficiency of these efforts is small now. We need to use a complex approach to look for those who are missing in action. We need to introduce changes to the legislation. We need to work together with the volunteers. We need to equip them and we need to organize their efforts, because volunteers are traveling there, they work there, so we need to coordinate our efforts with them more clearly, and we need to provide additional support for the families of those who are missing in action. And this is the instruction of the President of the Russian Federation. We have already come up with such a mechanism, and the draft law has been sent to the government. So we would like to urge you to expedite its adoption. As is known, there are two main forms of resolving the housing issue for the troops: providing an apartment or a housing subsidy, or providing housing under the mortgage system. This year, to provide the troops of the housing subsidy, we have allocated more than 80 billion rubles. As a result, subsidies were received by some 4,000 troops. At the same time, there is still a long line to receive these subsidies. This line is too big, more than 48,000 soldiers. And in this regard, the goal for this effort to enhance the accessibility of such housing and to resolve the issue with this long waiting list. And this year we need to allocate additional funding. Next year we need to allocate additional funding of 149 billion rubles for the housing issues, which will allow to increase the tempo, increase the rate of providing housing to ensure there are apartments for 9,000 troops per year. And we need to ensure that the rights of these troops is protected. We need to look into the entire system of the housing distribution. We need to introduce closer control over this, and we need to complete the construction of unfinished housing units. So basically, there are some housing units of the level of readiness of 80%, and we have 194 such units. In the military mortgage loans area, we need to ensure there is a possibility to acquire housing with inflation consideration, because the number of participants will double. It will reach 800,000 troops. So we need to closely monitor the availability of financial resources, and we need to pay special attention to the possibility of acquiring apartment of the sizes that they are supposed to receive, because the next year the troops will be able to acquire more than 65 square meters, which is exceeding the target number that we planned for initially. So we need to adjust it for the growing prices to make the housing more accessible. And priority number 6 is forming the feedback system with the troops and with their family members, between them and the Defense Ministry. It's a key area from the point of view of the timely reaction to the systemic issues. First of all, if we're speaking about protecting the rights, defending the rights of the troops, the number of those calling on the Defense Ministry has doubled now. There are more than 700,000 applications, and now we are introducing a new approach, and the gist of this new approach is switching from reacting to these queries to resolving the issues. Now, every request is removed from the database after the applicant has mentioned that the problem was resolved, or if there is it is impossible to resolve. To implement this kind of approach, we need to resolve the following issues. To change the way we are working with this request, we need to introduce a digital system that will allow the applicant to follow the course of working with their requests at every stage, and we need to ensure a system of appraising if they are satisfied with the services provided, and the terms that were promised must be followed. We need to introduce a system of monitoring and analysis for the requests to ensure that we can resolve all the systemic issues, and we need to launch the military social center in full. And we need to introduce a mechanism to analyze the information coming from the military correspondence. We have already started this effort in the ministry. We hold regular meetings with war correspondents. And then we instruct the military administration bodies to resolve all the outstanding issues. Between these meetings, we exchange information with war correspondents to react to the most urgent issues, and it yields good results, and we will continue with this effort. Priority number 7 is military and military technical cooperation. We should admit that the attempts of the collective West to isolate Russia in terms of military cooperation have failed. We are cooperating with more than 100 countries. We have expanded our cooperation with our allies and strategic partners from the CIS, Asia-Pacific region, Africa, Middle East, and Latin America. We have carried out 21 military exercises and joint patrolling of the airspace. We develop our cooperation and military education annually. Some 9,000 trainees from more than 50 countries attend Russian military educational institution. We exchange.
Pues seguiremos muy pendientes de todo lo que se diga en esa reunión, aunque ha dicho que se analizarán muchas cosas a puerta cerrada y sobre todo después de haber dicho, como tiene ese encargo además de preparar a ese ejército ruso para un conflicto con la OTAN en la próxima década. Seguiremos los detalles ahora. Hacemos una pequeña pausa y enseguida las noticias con Sergio Fernández.
Silver Gold Patrimonio nace en 2018 con el objetivo de innovar en el mercado de los metales preciosos de inversión, ofreciendo nuevas alternativas para que cualquier persona, familia o empresa pueda entrar en el fantástico mundo de los metales de inversión de forma sencilla y acompañada por consultores expertos en el sector. Silver Gold Patrimonio quiere avanzar contigo.
Creemos que la sociedad actual necesita más arte y más color. Le da a la gente la oportunidad de asimilar diferentes perspectivas. Es realmente un placer pintar este cuadro, porque es una hermosa imagen para comenzar. Lo último que pintaremos es el auricular en vez del pendiente.
Using a classic and merging it with modern. This is very provoking.
Mudarte de ciudad es un gran cambio y alquilar tu casa puede parecer arriesgado. ¿Estará tu vivienda protegida? Con SEAC, olvídate de preocupaciones. Nosotros garantizamos tu renta, pase lo que pase. Disfruta de tu nueva etapa con total confianza. Alquila tranquilo. SEAC responde.
Análisis técnico, análisis fundamental, psicotrading, value investing, smart money, indicadores, estrategias de trading y mucho más es lo que vas a aprender en este máster de trading de Active Trades. Sueñas con unas vacaciones a orillas del Mediterráneo. Oliva Nova Beach and Golf Resort es tu destino ideal. Un hotel en primera línea, las dunas, alquiler vacacional en nuestras villas y apartamentos. Sea como sea que te guste viajar, en Oliva Nova encontrarás la opción de alojamiento perfecta para ti. El resort para los deportistas. En Oliva Nova encontrarás instalaciones deportivas como un campo de golf de 18 hoyos diseñado por el legendario CB Ballesteros, 7 pistas de pádel al aire libre, rutas en parajes cercanos como el Parque Natural del Montgó y la Marjal Pegoliva y la posibilidad de practicar deportes acuáticos en las cristalinas aguas del mar Mediterráneo. El resort para los foodies. En Oliva Nova podrás disfrutar de la buena mesa y saborear el Mediterráneo en todos sus restaurantes, a platos de autor con ingredientes cuidadosamente seleccionados, deliciosas paellas, recetas locales y producto de cercanía. Y todo ello regado con un buen vino. El resort para los que buscan desconectar. En Oliva Nova todos encontrarán una manera para evadirse de la
actualmente sobre el país, emitidas en su día contra el régimen del ya depuesto expresidente Bashar al-Assad para facilitar la transición política y la solución de los enormes desafíos a los que se enfrenta el país. Según los datos que se manejan, el 90% del país vive en pobreza en Siria. Ayer, por cierto, se reanudaban los colegios en Alepo, el triunvirato del gobierno interino, y aún no se saben cuántos empleados tienen. También ha reanudado las actividades. Mientras tanto, continúan los ataques